Hey there! I hope you are having an amazing day. Today we're going to paint watercolor pumpkins in honor of the first day of fall. We are going to paint some pumpkins. So there's not gonna be a background or anything. I'm just showing you how to paint them. And we're going to do pumpkins that are a little bit different. I don't know if you guys have heard of Cinderella pumpkins, but they're really, really cute and fairy tale-like. So we're going to paint those. So we're gonna do a shade of green, one that's orange, and one that's kind of whitish gray. And we wanna stack these up. So I'm gonna very loosely draw the shapes. So the first one is going to be more round, but it's not round like an exact circle. It's kind of like a squished circle. And then I'm gonna make a tall one behind it. And I'm just doing the general shape right here so I can know where my pumpkins are gonna be laid out before I start putting some details in. Then I wanna do just maybe a little smaller pumpkin here. Okay. Now I'm going to make the stem right here. And it's gonna kind of come out. The stems on the Cinderella pumpkins are always a little hooked. So it's kind of this diamond shape at the bottom and then comes up to a hook. Then from here, I'm going to make these curved lines. This doesn't have to be perfect. This is just, you want to get the general shape. So they're really kind of curvy. I don't know how else to explain it, but just make these C shapes. And you want to see this at the bottom, the little humps or whatever you would call them. I'm gonna do one more really far out here. Ooh, that one got a little out of hand. And one more out here. And then just make these, you're not gonna see them on the side, but just these little C curves back here so it looks 3D. Then I'm gonna make this pumpkin doing a stem as well. And the Cinderella pumpkins are usually not tall like this. So I kind of am making this pumpkin up in my head, but I want it to be green. I'm gonna just do that same thing, those kind of oblong shapes that you see pumpkins having. Let's bring it down. And then just those little C curves in the back to make it look 3D. Then lastly, we have a little pumpkin right here, and I'm going to make the stem go this way. This is another Cinderella pumpkin. And we could start actually with that center, kind of an oval shape, and then I'm just making C curves next to it. This one I'm gonna make extra kind of wide. Doop. Doop. Okay, doesn't need to be perfect. We can put some leaves in here if you want. Let's do a couple leaves. So kind of like that maple leaf shape, 5 points. I'm sorry, I am not really teaching you guys how to draw. I just want to teach you how to do the watercolor. So I know that's probably not helpful right now, but just the general shape is it has 4 or 5 points. So I'm kind of making these little half thingamajiggers. I'm sorry, you guys. If you don't draw at all, I'm so sorry. Definitely go find a drawing video because I am not good at explaining how to draw things, but hopefully you think that I'm good at explaining how to do watercolor because that's what I'm trying to do here, not doing a drawing tutorial. Okay, so we have these little leaves here and we're gonna start painting. So now that we've drawn this with the pencil, I am gonna take my gum eraser. If you guys have a gum eraser, these work the best because they don't tear up your paper. So I'm just going to lightly erase. Almost like I push it down and pull it up so I'm not applying a lot of pressure and kind of ruining the texture of the paper. But I just, especially this pumpkin I want to make white, and I want to, or not white, but kind of grayish white. And I don't want to see all these pencil lines. So I want to get it as light as possible. We don't really have to worry about the leaves because those are going to be dark green or brownish, so we can make them darker. And this guy's okay because he's going to be orange, and this guy's going to be a greenish sage color. So let's start by mixing up some color, and I'm using my size 6 brush. I know I say this in every video, but if you don't know the basic techniques for watercolor or the tools to use, go look at my previous videos. I have 101 on techniques and 101 on what supplies you need. I'm mixing up a green. This is just whatever was in my well here, but a sap green would be really pretty, or a forest green. I want to mute this green down, so I'm going to add some blue. I want it to have almost a sage or eucalyptus color. I'm gonna need a lot more paint than this, hold on. I'm gonna grab a little bit of that reddish to make it a little more neutral and not so bright. And actually I want a little more blue. These are kind of, they're heirloom pumpkins, so it's really neat. They have a lot of different colors of them. Okay, so with that, I want to start, and we're doing the technique where we outline with the paint. I'm gonna need a little more pigment on there. So we're outlining, and then we're gonna come back with just water and fill it in. So make sure that this line is still wet. You don't want it to dry because this process will not work. So I'm getting just water on my brush, and I'm coming back in and just lightly touching it. And if you want, you can poke in some different colors. So maybe I'll pick up a little more blue, and I'll just kind of poke it in. That is way too dark. So I'm gonna wash off my brush. My brush is washed off and a little dry, and I'm gonna pick that up. Kind of spread it around because I'm not super stoked at how blue that is. And I'm just dragging my brush. It was washed off and dry, so it's picking up a lot of the moisture. Just poking in a little color. Okay, I'm happy with that. And keep in mind that our light source, I'm gonna say, is coming straight on. So this is actually gonna be the lightest, and you can pull up and make a highlight by using your brush that's dried off with no paint on it, and you can just pull up some paint. So that's gonna be pretty and tell the viewer that the light source is coming straight on. Now, because this is wet, I'm gonna need to do these other pieces that are not touching this. And then once this is dry, we can come in and do these pieces. And I explained that in my other video, but just make sure with watercolor, unless you're doing watercolor, you know, something that you want to bleed, then yes, you can touch the wet, like the wet on wet, but we don't want this to bleed. We want it to look kind of more realistic in a way, so we want there to be sharper lines. So I'm painting. If you guys could let me know, do you like my videos when you're actually going with me in real time, or would you prefer that I speed up this and just tell you the bare minimum, like the basics? So basically, I wouldn't show you me painting all of these right now. I would just speed it up to it's done when it's done. But personally, because I like to follow some other watercolor artists like Jenna Rainey, and I like following along with her, so I'm glad she doesn't speed it up. So let me know how you feel in the comments so I can make videos that you enjoy watching. Now I'm going to wash off my brush, dry it off, and I am gonna pull a highlight a little bit right here because this is gonna show some kind of texture and make it look a little more round by doing that. And I'm gonna actually pull up more paint here if I can. Okay. Now I'm gonna go to this side. And the same thing, we're just outlining that shape. Make sure we're mindful of the pumpkin underneath. Just doing that. I might poke in a little blue. Then just mix it around. They're cutting trees outside. That's probably, I hope you guys can't hear that, but if you can, I apologize. And then I'm gonna go and just get a slightly darker green, because what would happen naturally is around the stem, it would be a little darker. So I'm just poking that in. Small, intricate details like this with your watercolor is really going to matter and show through. I can't tell you how many times I was so bummed about a painting and then I went in and started adding a little more shading and it looked so much better. So there would be technically a shadow down here because these two pumpkins are meeting. So I am gonna poke in a little bit of a shadow. Now this one is almost dry over here, so it's not bleeding well. So I'm going to wash off my brush and just add a little water so it kind of bleeds, just tapping it in. We're gonna let this dry because if I went in and did these two pieces right now, it's going to bleed together and I won't get that more realistic clean line look. We're gonna move on to this orange pumpkin. Actually, let's go with the white pumpkin. So for white, I always tell my students this, there's no such thing as something in life that is completely white. So either there's shades of blue, there's shades of red, there's shades of yellow, and we will keep some of this white, of course, but we are going to have to use another color, otherwise we're not gonna have any depth or interest in the painting. So I'm mixing up a little bit, kind of like a brownish gray color. This is going to be so light. I'm gonna add a little more blue because I think that might look cool. And we're just gonna make, so there was water over here, so I'm gonna start with this piece because it's already wet. And instead of outlining the entire thing, I'm just going to outline the top here and here and here. I'm gonna wash off my brush and then just come in here and moving the water around. So it looks like a little bit of a gray pumpkin and I'm okay with that. I wanted it to kind of look gray, white. Rinsing off my brush. And I might put some little dots or something in this pumpkin to make it look more interesting. I think maybe a kind of brown color. Just poking in some kind of randomness. This is kind of a yellowy brown. Just tap, 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 tap with the tip of my brush. Back to my original color. Work on this one. We are going to see that line a little bit, the pencil line. And then you can pull up a little bit of the color if you want, and then grab that yellow brown again. Make it a little interesting. Are you guys fans of fall? I love summer, so it's always hard for me to say goodbye to summer. But I love fall too. I mean, there's something good about every season. See, okay, this wasn't completely dry and it touched, so we are getting a little bleeding there. Let's fill this guy in. Again, tapping in that yellow brown. And that's about all that we can do on that one right now until it dries. So let's move on to our orange pumpkin. I'm gonna mix up, I don't know what your guys' color palette looks like, but I've already got a red over here. So what I'm gonna do is add in some yellow. I actually have this really pretty color. It's called Indian yellow. and I think it would be pretty. But this is way too bright, especially for a Cinderella pumpkin. They're a lot more muted. So I am gonna mute this down. If you need to mute down a color, you can either add a little bit of black, or I recommend adding the opposite of that color. So the opposite of orange on the color wheel is blue. They're complementary colors. So when I add that in, I added too much in. But it's definitely gonna mellow it out. Actually, I think I'm into this color. Perfect. And I'm gonna start with that middle piece. Oh, that is a little brown. That's okay, let's just go with it. Rinsing off my brush, and then I'm just lightly touching the edges. It's causing it to bleed. I kind of have to push the water in a little bit because it's not moving exactly how I want. Okay, actually, you guys, I like this color. I'm gonna punch in a little bit of just that Indian yellow by itself. And the same thing for all these guys. Just outlining. It's very relaxing too because it's very methodical, because you are in a way just outlining these pieces that are all essentially the same shape. And we can do this back here. Same thing, we're just outlining it. And then getting just a little water because this is a small space. Filling it in. And we can't do too much more now because it's all wet. But our green pumpkin is dry, so we can go back to our green. And I'm gonna add just a touch of yellow. And we can outline this pumpkin. You do want to have some variation here. I like to change up the color just slightly. So on this one, I added some yellow. That way you're getting a little, it's always more interesting if you have it be slightly different. If it was just the exact same color, it might not be as interesting to look at. But this is almost too different, so I have to go back and add a little more blue there. I'm lifting. Okay. Over here too. I think this wasn't as dry as it should have been, to be quite honest. But that is why I tell you guys to make sure your stuff dries before you put in those other layers, because it makes a difference. It just looks so much cleaner. And these back here, I would say they're probably slightly darker because they're further away. Oops, I'm getting it. It's bleeding because I'm not being patient. Now back to our little gray pumpkin. Wash off your brush, pick up that gray color again, outline. Rinse, and then pull the color around. And again, dropping in just a little bit of that gray brown. And feel free to darken if you need to on this edge, because this would be darker because it's kind of tucked into the skin. It's not right on top. That'll help it look more 3D. And these little pieces sticking out the back are going to be darker because they're further away. This actually has way too much water on it, but we're just going to work with it. Okay, and this is not quite dry yet, so I want to move to our leaves. Now, if you want to make these look like they're in the beginning of fall, these leaves would probably be really bright green or just slightly turning brown, but I want to make them look like they're more into fall. So I'm going to pick up a green, and I'm just doing the same thing I did with the pumpkins. I'm outlining the shape of the leaf, and I'm actually just going to fill it in instead of getting the water, because we're just going to poke in a little bit of color. Rinse your brush, and then you can grab the same color we use for these pumpkins and kind of just tap it in. And it might look a little bit funky, but when it dries, it usually looks a little lighter, and it just looks better. And then for this leaf, I'm actually going to make it brown. So maybe this leaf has started to change colors. And I could even just drop in a little green. Maybe there's a little bit of green still holding on in there. This one's a darker green. Maybe brown. Again, I'm just painting them outright painting them like I'm filling in a coloring book. I'm not using the technique where I outline and do with water, because I'm creating variation in these by adding that little, pop of color at the end. This one's, I use a little more brighter yellow in it. And we will add in the small detailed lines once they're dry. We can do the stem up here. We're not quite ready to go here because this is wet and I don't want it to bleed. For your stem, mix up a brown color and add a little bit of black so it's a little muted. And of course, you can even do the stems really light. Some pumpkin stems are really, really light. This one I'm outlining. We'll come in and make small details once it's dry. But the areas where it would be darker is, say that the sun's hitting this way, so it'll cast a shadow here. And of course, it would cast a shadow where the stem starts. Always be thinking about lighting when you're painting. That is the way you're going to get better at it, and you're gonna like how your paintings look. Just punch in a little darkness. We can do the sky too. You don't want all the stems to be exactly the same color. That would be boring. So change it up a little bit. You could add a little bit of blue. You could make it lighter. You can make it darker. You can make it more gray, you can make it more brown. Up to you. Even green, you can make it more green. This guy. I encourage you to really maybe get a pumpkin and look at it and study it. Where does the light hit it? What small details make the pumpkin different than other pumpkins? Or just really examining and being exploratory when you're looking at something, I believe helps your art so much. Maybe punch in a little here. Okay, let's finish the details on this orange pumpkin. I'm doing this pretty fast. If this was a client project for myself, or if I was, gonna put this in my Etsy shop, I would honestly go a little bit slower because I really would want everything to dry really well so that I get really crisp, clean lines. For the sake of this video, I want to show you guys how to paint this, but you definitely want to take your time with it. You'll get crisper lines. Now, instead of outlining it, because I want this to appear like it's sticking out, I want it to be really light, I just outlined the inside. It's too much water on my brush, so I just dabbed it on a paper towel. And I'm applying pressure to kind of pull that paint up. Light. And like I've been saying the last couple of times, doing this slower would definitely yield better results because you would see more variation and cleaner lines. But we're kind of doing this a little faster. I really like this orange color. I was worried about it at first, but I like it. And we would pull the light up on this one, or pull the paint up, sorry, to create it a little more light because this is in front of this one. Do this. You can almost just fill these ones in back here because they're gonna be a lot darker. And I feel like this needs to be a little darker. It's bleeding because it's not dry. My mistake. It's okay. It still looks cool. And lastly, we're gonna go in with a smaller brush. So I'm gonna use my size 2 brush. And we're going to make little lines on these leaves. Take a dark green, maybe mix it with a little brown. So we can make the stems. Just lightly connecting the stems and drawing the lines through the leaves. So the vein of the leaf. And it's not completely dry, so it is bleeding. That's okay. Just a line down the middle, a couple veins. Awesome. And if you wanted to, you could go in with maybe a dark brown and make lines in here. Give that, these are not, this one's a little dry. Nope, it's not dry yet, so it's not gonna work. But there you go, a pumpkin tutorial. I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you did, let me know in the comments below. And also let me know if you want the videos to be instructional but sped up, or if you like going through the whole painting process with me. Thanks for watching. Have an awesome day.